Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. So, this is gonna be interesting, more or less. I'm the other side of the spectrum than I normally am with this one. But the thing is, I watched the video already. I agree with some of the points. I disagree with other points. In the same points, I have 50-50 in in some of the points too. But the thing is, my major problem with the video is just the title and the title on the thumbnail. I think it's a completely fine video. Maybe the title is a little bit clickbaity, but that's the only problem. Like, the only major problem. Now, let's watch the video, and I'm gonna more or less talk a little bit on the three first points, but they kinda tie in, so I'm gonna probably do a stop and after the third one to express a larger point. But let's go.
Cyberpunk 2077 is honestly my pick of 2020 as the game of the decade. It's a big call, but it is for a plethora of reasons. And I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention first and foremost that CD Projekt Red has universally won the hearts of gamers for their consumer-centric practices. You're breathtaking! In a sea of once great gaming publishers of yesteryear. Doing things like allowing you to upgrade Cyberpunk from your current gen console to the next gen for free, or having no lecherous microtransactions. However, I would be also remiss if I didn't outline some of my preliminary concerns after watching all the developers' interviews and comments on features that will be implemented in-game, and a bunch of other features you would think are no-brainers at this point, which they have bafflingly decided to exclude. So, without further ado, here are my 10 concerns as to why Cyberpunk 2077 may potentially be bad.
Here's the thing. This is more or less the title on the thumbnail, so those are the two titles that the video has. And I would say what he said on the beginning of this sentence would be a far better title for the video in question. Now, I'm not gonna say that I'm not in fault to do similar shit, because I am. But the notion is, more or less, the points that he brings are valid. I just don't think those are reasons that would make the game bad. It probably would make reasons that would make the game not be for you. Remember what I said before. Sometimes the game is not for you.
The first piece of really solid backlash that I'd seen around Cyberpunk had to do with the developer's choice to not implement third person. Now, there is an entire genre around first person shooters, and it is primarily that, a shooter. And I can see how it would take away from many of the headaches about developing combat, as well as the implementation of different weapons, let's say like the smart gun, and probably halve the development time to implement as first person versus the headache of additional third person. However, as this is first and foremost an RPG, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up that options are always best. If I had to play personally Skyrim in just first person, I would have stuck to just the basic sneak and bow build and wouldn't have branched out to anything else, because
here is where my first point. I partially agree. Not by the same reasons that he's placing here, then the lack of third person is a detriment. I agree. He will bring the same point that I would bring in a later point, really a later point. But I will tell something interesting here, and that is probably because my personal brain damage. But even if it is the normal playstyle on Skyrim, aka the Adventures of the Stealth Archer, I tend to go in the opposite way. No matter what happens, no matter how it happens, I tend to play Skyrim with a melee character, and I tend to play in first person. The reason is, holy fuck, the third person combat on Skyrim sucks. I never felt like I never felt that it did connect. So, even if the problem still stands the same for the first person. It allowed me to gauge better distance, and you're gonna notice a fun part of the video. But it does allow me to gauge a little bit better and control my character a little bit better than it does. But one point that I want to bring in Skyrim, you can't dodge. The only thing that you can do is block and hit. Keep that in mind, put that on your hat, and hold to that information. Now, there is a valid thing for why there is a problem to not having the third person, but I disagree that it's a like full detriment of it. And all RPGs needs to be on these thing on they need to have both. First, Cyberpunk will be more or less focused on the gunplay. The melee are an option, but even if they are heavily featured, you can see that most of the time they always showing the gunplay being guns, and even the cyberware that exists on more of a melee folks or a secondary. So it is more or less a better idea to focus on having the gunplay on first person better. And if you want to see how interesting it is, there is a video from a guy from I think it's Midden Squad, where he plays Fallout New Vegas. I think is the Big Iron Challenge, where he only plays, I think, in third person, or it is only like without aim, like using the aim. So it's not the best, but I would say it's I'm okay having only first person for combat. But there is a reason why I would very like to have third person during the game.
It really limits you into what type of build you have. And naturally, I gravitate towards third person for shooters, and just in general, I prefer Grand Theft Auto 5 in third person, but I do actually understand that later fans wanted a first person option, and it does create more immersion. Personally, I think that it's a mistake, as one of the biggest games of the decade, especially moving into multiplayer, that you're going to be locked into first person. The second point that really does tie into the first person.
Let me finish the point. Yes, like I said, it is it's sad that we're not gonna have the third person for more this at this point, not the prior. I disagree when it comes to it locks you into a build. The thing is, like more or less it's shown, the game does focus a lot more on the gunplay. That would be a better point to bring up. If I want to make a better version, and me saying I want to make a better version is the most asshole-ish thing that I could say, but would it be something along the lines of, oh, the game does prioritize the gunplay, the use of guns instead of the melee combat because the first person, and that is totally fine, and I do agree. But in a similar fashion to my video on Phantom Brigade, that is the way the game is being designed, and the question becomes: is that a detriment enough? Is that a big problem enough to turn you off from the game or not? And if it is, like I said during the end of that video, sometimes the thing is the game is not for you. The thing is, uh, advertise the game properly. And at the moment, until now, CD Projekt Red came out and said, no, there won't be third person. They didn't show third person except on cutscenes, so more or less is that point, and I think it's okay. They are being honest with you.
An option is character customization. What is the point of collecting items, different outfits, or even customizing your character to look a certain way if you're just going to see it in cutscenes? I like to have the swag, I like to definitely build out the aesthetic of a character.
Now, uh, there is an interesting point that I want to make here. Will you? Because I know there is some cutscenes that you see more on third person, but there is a lot of cutscenes that you see in first person. Even by the detriment of it, I would prefer to have major cutscenes playing in first person. I agree. This is more or less a problem. I think only people who play Fallout will have that thing, and it's the vantage shot thing. While you're walking from point A to point B and nothing is happening, you're just, like I said, you're just walking down the streets. I tend to pop out onto third person to look to my character and see how he looks, how the customization is, how the things that I acquire into now is, things like that. Now, huh? But with that in mind, I don't think it's a big detriment. I think it is a problem. I would prefer to have it. I stopped it because of the Morgan Black Hand stuff. But the thing is, I agree. This is indeed something, and it does bum me down a little. I would prefer, for example, something along the lines of, yeah, you can walk on third person, but during combat, boom, you're pushed to first person. Or maybe uh, the use ex machina approach, where you're always walking in first person, but during the dialogue, you have that more cinematic or dynamic camera that show your entire character.
But there's no real reason to grind out to, say, get a special design outside of your gun because you're going to see that on screen if you're not going to be seeing it outside of the cutscenes. I don't agree that character customization is properly fostered by first person only. Now, the third point that ties to first person as well is actually first person melee. I find that if you're going to be doing melee attacks, that first person really makes it difficult to gauge distance, and it also makes the animations clunky.
I gotta be honest, I kinda disagree, but I agree. It's a 50-50 on this one, because, yes, it depends. It really depends on what we were talking. Is the game built around the first person combat or third person? The question about melee, it's a lot more problematic, but for example, Shadow Warrior did a reasonably well. Skyrim, I prefer melee combat on first person, but it's because I prefer. And if that goes for both Skyrim or not Skyrim, Elder Scrolls or the Fallout series. Other games that I'm trying to remember, but Deus Ex, it's not a good option because there is not really melee combat. There is melee options. Prey, you did have the range. It's not. Really not a. It's more of a backup weapon in the same way than, for example, the crowbar on Half Life. The question is, uh, the fact of gauging the distance between on the melee from third person or first person. It really depends. Yes, for something like Dark Souls, it works perfectly. But the entire combat is built around the melee combat, not the gunplay combat. While, for example, on Fallout New Vegas, there is a reason why I'm bringing Fallout so much, but bear with me. Uh, for example, like I said on Fallout, even the melee combat, like in third person, is not that better than the melee combat in first person.
You can't roll, you can't do anything too kinetic like spin about because it makes the whole camera whir and it feels very jarring. You want to pop out, or
Like I said, remember, even on Skyrim, then you can't do third person combat. You can't roll either, so. Eh? Like I said, this is not a. It seems for everything that we see, uh, melee combat is more of a backup thing than your main source of damage.
I personally like to pop out into third person. So I won't be doing a melee build at all. I don't think that, outside of just curiosity, because it really has turned me off on a lot of games. Now, I know people love it. Some people will play, say, the Dishonored series really seems to have done it justice in terms of people that like it. But for me,
I will point out, then I understood the example he's made, but Dishonored is not a good example because Dishonored is a stealth game. So combat is more of a soft fail. Therefore, you not like combat is not the main thing on Dishonored, so I don't think it's a great example to give here. I would probably give the example of Shadow War, maybe.
it makes me almost motion sick. I
What is that game? There is Chivalry. Uh, that would probably be the best example.
think that that's the best way to describe it. I don't feel like first person is the best option when it comes to melee attacks whatsoever. The fourth red flag for myself is bullet sponge enemies, which is the arcade style of seeing damage pop up in numbers and displayed as you're shooting them. And it looks like
Yes and no. Damage numbers popping up or a thing then doesn't necessarily mean the enemy will be bullet sponge. I disagree with that statement, but he brings a point that I do disagree, but let's go for it.
the enemies themselves could take a lot of bullets. I think for immersion's sake that not having the numbers A pop up above your enemy's head as you're blasting them is ideal. But second, that I just don't want enemies to take 27 bullets. There's nothing better than a clean kill, whether you are rewarded for that nice headshot or a stealthy attack. Just anything basically that's over about 3 consecutive hits or
Yes, I agree. The grunts should take 3 or 4 shots to go down, like more or less it happened on this scenario that he's showing. But, let me tell you something. If I pop 3 shots at an smasher and he goes down, I would be very disappointed. That motherfucker took a nuke and he's walking around. So, I agree, then too much bullet sponginess is a problem, and I agree, the first thing that I'm gonna do when I pick up this game is turn the fuck off these numbers off. But if the enemy has armor and stuff like that, yeah, I think he should take a little bit of bullets. Like he's showing here, I'm okay-ish.
lower if you hit them in a certain area doesn't really feel good. I'm not a Borderlands fanatic because of the appearing numbers. Again, you can probably toggle it, but the bullet sponge nature of the enemies versus, say, Red Dead, where you had a very cinematic way of killing your enemies and it kept the immersion.
And that's a thing. That is a comparison that I maybe was something tied to what I said before on the other video, not on this one. It's the question of, yes, I understood the comparison you were making about Red Dead, but it's the same thing with Fallout New Vegas, for example. Some enemies will take a lot more bullets to go down than other enemies. It's just that. Why armor? They have better armor, and because of that, that is life. You would need to, for example, utilize a weapon with armor piercing or something along those lines. And I prefer, for example, if the character is a grunt and he's taking more than 4 shots to go down or 1 headshot to go down, yes, that would be a problem. But if a fucking guy in a juggernaut armor is like taking 2 shots to kill, then I think we also have a problem.
In game. I was never pulled out and thought, this is a game. There was this satisfaction of, I've got a great hit on my enemies, they've died, I get the little cinematic death at the end, and then I move on, versus bullet sponge, they're soaking it up for 5 minutes because my gun's just not good enough. I feel like that statement in and of itself is wrong. My gun isn't good enough. A projectile weapon that shouldn't feel like it's a pea shooter at any given time. In a game that boasts a sea of personal customization.
Look, I don't want to be this guy. I don't want to be that of an asshole. But let me show you something. During the entire fight, you're seeing the guy struggles to damage this fucker, right? I want you to pay attention to this part. You see, this entire fight, the guy did almost no fucking damage. You saw the entire thing. Then, he damaged the thing that made the guy pop out of the armor. He already had took damage for the damage on the armor, and now he's taking here. So, the part, like, it's very difficult to see, probably on YouTube and after my video, but from here to here is where he took damage from the explosion on his back. From here, god damn it. Yeah, shit. It's very, let me playback speed to this. So yeah, took the damage like I showed. You can barely see. But just gonna stop when it shows more or less the. He would take more or less a little bit above his health. Would point out, then this is more or less a mechanic fight, where 5 shots from this shotgun would be enough to kill the guy. Then a bullet sponginess. So yes, this fight showed more or less a bullet sponge enemy because he has a fucking riot shield. But I don't think the point that he's making does count. Because, well, when you got him exposed, it took not that many shots. And again, using the Fallout example, and there is a reason why I'm using that example that much in the video. It's more or less it's more or less par for the course. Remember, this is kind of an RPG, so expect a certain amount of bullet sponginess, and for what seems to be a boss that is more or less mechanically inclined, not bullet sponge inclined, I'm okay with like 5 or 6 shots from the shotgun to kill a decent amount.
That shouldn't feel like it's a pea shooter at any given time. In a game that boasts a sea of personal customization, a strange omission is you cannot customize your car. Instead, cars already come customized. You will.
That's I don't know if that is true, because for example, on the car trailer they said, they mentioned about customization, especially when they were talking about the sport cars. If that's true, it does indeed sucks. If you can't like put a decal or a paint job or something along those lines on your car, that indeed sucks, and I 100% will agree with him that not being able to customize your car sucks. especially because the car is more or less the only thing that it is on more on like third person, so it is something in you are then you see more like a character avatar, something along those lines. So yeah, I would very disagree that the choice of not being able to customize is good.
Will have to have a skill to jack them, but you cannot take them to shops and quote unquote pimp them out. And that goes for player housing as well. Now, V will be able to acquire a lot of apartments and different houses, but you won't be able to make them yours by decorating them or changing out the style, color, or functionality of them. So those are two disappointing omissions from the game. During your adventure,
The house stuff is a little bit less of a point for me, but I can see where it comes from. The car one is one that I agree. It's 100% a lot more bullshit than it should. Like, you at least decals or paint jobs or things that should be included on the game. And again, in that case, if you really can't customize for shit, I would say more or less uh, CD Projekt Red needs to come clean, because especially during their car trailer, they said when they I will try to put here right about now.
Shoes who love the smell of exhaust and the roar of street wildlife. Their powerful engines and exchangeable parts make them perfect for tuning.
Come on! I want to smell that choo-choo burn!
As you listen, they talk about customization of cars, so strange that you can't do, but yeah.
you will be able to meet new people who act as companions. They'll join you on specific missions, but it has been stated by the developers that it works like real life, where you meet up with somebody, they'll say, let's do a job together, but then they will leave once that's done. And that's disappointing, as it is a staple of RPGs to have a companion that will be persistent throughout your travels, that you'll get to know, unlock more of their own story, maybe be a romanceable character.
No, we know there will be romanceable options on Cyberpunk 2077, so that is checked. We maybe I'm getting that wrong, but the feel that I got from the interviews and stuff is you're not gonna be able to choose companions and bring them with you Mass Effect style or Fallout/Skyrim style. It's a more or less a thing. Some missions will have interactions with some people, and I'm okay with that. It's more or less The Witcher style. It's your journey, and well, some people will be around with you and sometimes, and at some points they won't.
And then when you do a new run, you might find a new companion. So there are companions, but they're more throwaway, or interactions will be slight compared to other games.
Again, it's difficult to say for what we have right now, because again, there is the possibility of, oh, yes, there is this thing. Yes, you will not have they as your companions 24/7, but besides Joan Silverhand, but you'll be capable of interacting with a lot of the people around you. Most of the people will not be like, oh, you arrive of they have they in one mission, then you're never gonna see they again.
Gaming experiences. One of the boasting points that the developers had been talking about was the fact that the city itself was very much vertical, the verticality of design. So like Judge Dredd, you could go into a building block and you could explore the different levels. Now, even though Night City is quite massive in scale, you cannot actually enter every single building, and I get that. That would be a logistical nightmare. But the question then becomes, if you're so proud of being able to scale the buildings internally, what about outside? Are there any flying vehicles, or aerodynes as they're called in-game? The short answer is no. Basically, developers have said that the Aerodynes are outside of a pleb's pay grade, that you will never be able to come up with the money or eddies to pay for an Aerodyne, which I think hopefully they will patch in later, or at least would have considered for endgame.
I'm not talking much about this point because I don't have much to talk about it. It's more or less I don't care. Really, it is. The thing is, no flying vehicles. Sure, I don't see a problem. Oh, you can't get in every building. Think the fuck? I prefer having, like, every place that I get in be something, like, be created, be handcraft, than just a fucking giant empty wasteland of places that you can go in and out just because, and that becomes the fact, oh, you have to justify why the player will get in, or if just empty, so you end up shoving the fucking game up full of collectibles and buildings. So, for me, this is a non-point. If it is something that really bums you down not being able to fly around, I can get that. I can get behind. It's sad and you not, but sometimes the game is not designed for you to see from above.
Game,
That's
because
just
nobody
life.
wants to have to go through an elevator on a building up 26 floors, rather than, once you beat the game, be able to jack an Aerodyne, own your own, even a jetpack, and have to be able to scale the vertical limits of the city. I feel like that's a staple of Endgame, whether it is in, say, a Grand Theft Auto where you fly over the city which you've basically conquered. There's also the element of multiplayer in a few years, and
In a few years. Right now, this game doesn't have a multiplayer, so let's chill the fuck out about that one.
I feel like flying cars may be a bit much in that I'm not sure how they would implement it, but just keeping on single player and the verticality of buildings, I can't see players being happy with having to scale buildings manually every single time that they go into a large skyscraper.
That depends. For example, okay. You have to scale, go deliver a mission on the top floor of skyscraper. You get the elevator, it's a fucking 5 minute jump from point, I don't know, it's not gonna be a 5 minute, it's a X amount of minutes going from elevator to there. And probably something is happening during. You have conversations, because remember, this game doesn't have procedure generate, so it's not gonna be like, I doubt there will be a lot of silent moments. Maybe only during your driving, and even I doubt that. So, again, for me, this wasn't more or less non-point. It's personal preference here, more than anything in the video.
I know that Cyberpunk has a lot of quirky characters just by default, whether it be because of their cyber psychosis or the neon over-the-top aesthetic in the dystopian future. However, I would be remiss if I wasn't a little disappointed there wasn't more humor infused in the game. Now, I'm not saying that there would be cracking jokes and this would be Rage 2, where people would be over-the-top cartoonish versions of themselves, but
Let me say something. The Star Wars Old Republic music, it's kind of pushing me off. But, first, we don't know. I can maybe agree with what he's saying here. That, yes, comedy is something, it's sometimes necessary, especially on a longer game, to take away from the sad tales and stuff like that. But we yet can't confirm if the game will be just a Blake barrel. Because let's be honest, now thinking about, there is a lot of comedy. Not comedy itself, more satire about stuff with the shows, with the, even if you see the style video, you have the entertainment that the TV show, like it's clear holy hell, I can't speak today. Satire, and you have like jokes around that thing. So I see there is humor in the game. Maybe the thing is the humor didn't hit the guy that much, so that's why he's saying, oh, it doesn't have.
I would say that Fallout New Vegas really was the perfect middle ground. The comedy in the Fallout series kind of really took the ease off of the drudgery of really trudging across a post-apocalyptic nuclear wasteland. And a lot of the humor derived from people's own morals and their own convictions and belief systems. It wasn't just slapstick gags, though there were a lot of Easter eggs peppered throughout the wastes, but also just the way that the people handled the situations. Now, I haven't experienced enough of Cyberpunk's writing to actually comment on this fully, but what I've...
Again, maybe that is a point. Fallout is more funny, haha, than I think Cyberpunk it is. Maybe, and that's the thing, a lot of people may have different takes on this, depending on their experience of Cyberpunk. The one-shots that I play on tabletop were more or less a little bit serious in the tone, so sure, I wasn't expect too much humor, and I do see some parts of humor in the game. That's one of the reasons why I do believe this is a far more of a subject than any of the points on the video.
Seen thus far in the advertising makes me believe that the whole tone is going to be about grit. It's going to be about the questioning of a cyberpunk future and technology and the effects on human beings, and less about the levity of dealing with the situation of people going too far. But again, I could be wrong, and I hope I am on this one.
Okay, but the question becomes, what is the problem if the storytelling takes a more dark approach? Read and serious tone on the story is not necessarily bad. And even that, the game shows a lot of shows a little bit more of humor on some parts. There is the more moments of not focus on the dark tone or that, or jokes around between characters and stuff like that. So it's kind of this is a point then I wouldn't make, like, not go full on.
I was very disappointed when I learned that you wouldn't be able to join gangs or factions within the game. Cyberpunk painstakingly decided to add a lot of different gangs from the tabletop. Some of them have been changed, but they all looked fun and have a rich history, which I enjoyed exploring in the lore of Cyberpunk, in the World of Cyberpunk book. So I was more than disappointed that you couldn't ally yourself with different factions. Now, the developers have stated that V is a solo mercenary, that basically you'll never be trusted by the gangs. And in terms of writing, that makes sense. But if I wanted to, say, have different endings of the game, again, a Fallout New Vegas scenario where one time you see the logic of Mr.
And here's where it kind of go full circle to the video that I did before, like a couple hours ago. The thing is, the game won't satisfy everyone, and the main thing, what we're taking here is Cyberpunk. It's not a similar narrative for Fallout New Vegas. I get what he's trying to talk, I get the example, but I think it is not the best example to give. Now, this is probably subjective bullshit that I'm gonna talk now, but hold with me for a while. Fallout New Vegas, it's not the story of the Career 6. It's the story of New Vegas. Courier is the guy who chooses which domino is gonna fall. You are the guy who's gonna choose that. But in the end, it's more or less the story of New Vegas. It ends more or less about how the Courier affect New Vegas and how New Vegas is after. Because remember, at the end, you just walk away to the sunset on the rail yard. Holy shit! I can't talk. You just walk away to the sunset like a Western hero. But this story seems to be more about the character V. He is more or less the main character, and it's not like the character then we gonna see Night Seat to their eyes. We're gonna be seeing the story of V from point A to point B, whatever that may be, while we are seeing on New Vegas the story of New Vegas. We are shaping New Vegas, and here we are shaping V's story. So for whatever reason we have on narrative wise, yes, there may be explanation why we won't join gangs. And I agree, it would make sense that if we are a mercenary, that we decide to not close some doors. Although probably some doors will always be closed by. Uh, but again, this is far more of a personal thing. Which kind of narrative style you prefer? You prefer a more personal style or a less personal style? I'm okay with both, as long as the story then they are telling me is good.
The house. The next, you think maybe I'm going to try Kaiser's way. It depends on their morality and it makes you pay more.
Let me go back because I want to.
The next, you think maybe I'm going to. Basically, you'll never be trusted by the gangs. And in terms of writing, that makes sense. But if I wanted to, say, have different endings of the game, again, a Fallout New Vegas scenario where one time you see the logic of Mr. House, the next you think maybe I'm going to try Kaiser's way. It depends on their morality and it makes you pay more attention to what they say, their values, their interactions with you as the.
The thing is, here on Cyberpunk 2077, you are not gonna be ending with the. You're not gonna be seeing the ways from the 6-3 or the Latinos or Moxies. It's V's version of an ending. You're gonna be seeing. You're gonna be arriving to his ending. More or less in a similar way to The Witcher. You couldn't join a faction. You couldn't enjoy the Empire or the Northern Kingdoms or whatever. But you aid they on achieving some of their goals or not. And that built the story of this character. So, yes, again, it's more or less a story about a place or a story about a person.
Player and the world as a whole, because you realize you'll become invested in either siding with them or against them, and then mentally put a checkpoint of I'm going to come back to this potentially later to either side with them or to kill them.
I disagree then, because you're not going to be able to join factions, you can do that. Missions was already proven, then missions will have moments where you will side with, you probably will, gangs will be against each other. They made a point of talking about those things, for example, Voodoo Boys and Animals, the Moxies and the Tiger Claws, the Voodoo Boys and the Watch, the Latinos and I think the Sixth Streets, maybe, the Corpos and whatever. So there will be more individual scenarios where you going to be put on that. And because of that, you may not join, but I think they said there will be reputation on with the gangs, and there will be probably consequences about your actions, both in a singular quest or throughout the campaign. So again, it's a more or less of a you're not gonna become a member of the Moxies, but yes, like a character on a tabletop. I'm not gonna say it wasn't my character, but it was a character indeed. Said, God take, God takes. Holy shit, I can talk. God takes care of children, drunken, and hookers. Sometimes the man is busy, so I decide to lend a hand. If you want to play that way, you go and play. There will be consequence, there will be whatever. And if you want to play next time in a different way, you do.
Was really one of those things I had hoped that they were leaving in the game and they didn't. Again, I do hope that this game is the game of the decade. I've really put my money on that, but there were definitely some design choices where I thought I will look forward to making this video, coming back after the game's finished and finding out if any of my concerns were unfounded or if they were on the money. Anyway, thanks so much for watching.
The thing is, he's not wrong. They are concerns. They are motives that can place someone off of the game. They are problems that some people may view of the game. And I'm entirely in agreed, and if that is your personal option, like I said, even in some of my videos, maybe if you really value joint factions, melee combat being the folks, and the third person, maybe the game not gonna be for you. But that's the thing. Those criticisms then he brings are valid? Yes, they are. It's his opinion. I even agree, as I showed, with some. But I just think the saying these are reasons why Cyberpunk will be generally bad. No, those are problems with the game. Yes, they are. Again, they are not crucial problems. They are problems. Point. Now, leave your opinion. Maybe I'm full of shit. That's not a maybe. I'm probably full of shit. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a fun thing to do this video really a couple hours after me recording a video where I said that Cyberpunk will disappoint a large amount of people. Because more or less, things similar than that. But, well, leave your opinion, comment down below or whatever. See you guys next time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. This was the video. If you enjoyed, leave it a like. If you didn't, leave it a dislike. If you have anything to say, please leave a comment. And if you want to see what the hell is gonna be coming next on this mess, subscribe. And see you guys on the next episode.